You fail to understand, and the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. So as you probably, most of you know, I haven't been doing a lot of streaming lately, so please let me know in the chat if I'm really out of practice. So okay, good. So the reason I've come on today, as you can probably tell from the thumbnail, I recently made a comment in which I said I did not believe there were children in the Sea Org. So I'm assuming, let me look at the comments before we go on. I want to make sure that I'm not being misunderstood. I'm actually being heard here. Oh, God damn it. Okay, all good. Okay, good. So I'd recently made this comment, and this was based on my experience. I wasn't asserting this to be a fact, and I appended the statement by saying, if anybody has any evidence to the contrary, I'm more than happy to hear it, and to make to correct my statement. And so, because as I said, it was based on my working at Gold, working at Scientology Media Productions, time I'd spent in orgs, blah blah blah, that I'd seen over the years, ever since Miscavige banned babies. And by the time I got to the Gold, there was no babies there. There were kids at the ranch. I saw them all grow up and go to work at Gold or be sent off or whatever. That's a whole nother story. So, but I received, my friend Liz Gale reached out to me, and she sent me this email, and I want to read it because I really appreciate her sending this. And it says, on the point of there are no children in the Sea Org anymore, I just want to say that teenagers are children, no argument there. I was 23 when I got in Scientology. When I look back now, I was like nowhere near an adult. 14 to 18-year-olds are children, and teens are still recruited into the Sea Org. This doesn't mean they are doing it illegally, as in some states, the age of being able to work full-time or become emancipated is 16. Parents sign off. As an expert, I guess I'm a quoted expert in Scientology. And by the way, I'm not an expert in Scientology. I'm an expert in my experience in Scientology. That's my area of expertise. And as an author, your messages to the public matter. I am deeply concerned that asserting that there are no more children in the Sea Organization is a dangerous sentiment for the 14 to 18-year-olds inside. I hope you can understand this distinction and why, as an advocate for children in both my personal and professional life, this would be important to clarify. Sadly, this is one of the most heavily recruited demographic, teens, for the Sea Organization, as they are physically capable but not educated in the world. They can be abused, and then a new paperwork can be signed at 18, erasing any chance of recourse later for that child if they leave. So first of all, big shout out to Liz for sending that to me. I know that's all anecdotal evidence, but just based on that alone, because I know Liz and I trust her, I am absolutely going to amend my statement that there's no children this year, because I was completely unaware of this. Now, since that happened, I've been attacked, and in some cases rather viciously, for saying there's no children in Scientology. And I'm not quite sure how these two things got conflated, because I never said there's no children in Scientology. I've talked about children being in Scientology. I raised two kids until the early teens in Scientology. When I left Scientology, I knew children that were in Scientology. I helped, unfortunately, when I was at Gold, I helped edit study materials, which Scientology study materials for Study Tech, which were aimed at children. Fortunately, those study materials were never adopted by the state of California. They were trying to get them adopted, and so I helped them edit it. And the one thing I am proud of is that I forced them to use genderless pronouns in all the study materials, which was my last kind of only victory at working for the church when I left. When I finally left, is that I was able to sort of guilt them into, if it was something was being written newly, then it would be written with genderless pronouns, and not, if Hubbard wrote it, obviously nobody's going to change it. But that's really off the point. So as I said, I'm being attacked for it. I'm being attacked because I supposedly said there's no children in Scientology, and I did say when I made the statement about no kids that I didn't think there were children in the Sea Org. I did say, look, if somebody has some evidence, so like I got this one thing. I don't know this person. I'm not criticizing this person. They're free to do whatever they want, but I want to show this to you. I got this. Let me see.
Mitch Briscoe.
Pause this. So I got this. I'm just going to turn the sound on because the sound is like there's nothing useful in the sound. So this person with a YouTube account reposted a video that had been floating around, and this is a picture. It's a video of a van pulling up at the Kansas City org and unloading kids. They've been picked up after school. We all know about this. Reese Quibell spoke about it because that was her org, the place where she did Scientology. And what was I going to say? Sorry, I got distracted by my mod. So we know about this. Kids are picked up after school. They're dropped off at the org. We know there's kids in Scientology. We know they're doing these training routines called bull baiting, in which sometimes there's sexual content. We know they're studying. Many of them are studying auditing, and they are auditing people at beyond their age appropriateness. Like we know this is going on. And so here, I'm just going to play the video. And this was aimed at me. So basically, I said, I didn't believe based on my experience. And it's my experience. And now I'm changing that. I didn't believe there was in the Sea Org. And now this person is saying, well, and I asked if somebody can give me evidence. And so she did this thing. It's actually called, the stream is called something like, here's the proof, Mitch Briscoe. Here's the proof. And this is not the proof of what we were talking about. A lot of you, I don't know if many of you saw this because this is a very small channel, but this will give you an idea. So this is the proof that I said something that I never said, because I never said there were kids in the Sea Org. There weren't kids in Scientology, and I was really kind of appalled that the conversation has become about whether what I said or didn't say, where I'm more than willing to correct what I did say and sort of add to my experience. Peace Dog said, Mitch, report her channel. I just did. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'm not here to she has a right to speak. You can report her channel. I may do too. I mean, she's not really bullying me like other people have. I don't really care about that because that's more about them than it is about me. But so basically that's why I wanted to come on today and clear that up and tell you that I'm fully on board with the idea that these kids are being recruited, just something I was not aware of, and that to clarify the fact that I never said that there were no children in Scientology, and YouTube content creators shouldn't be trying to gain traction in their accounts. I mean, anyway. I think I'm done with that. So that's about. And please, if you want me to address your comment, if you could just put a question mark or write something so I know to, or I can just look at them and I'll see if we want to. Okay. You guys are funny. Anyway, I really appreciate you all coming by. So anyway, that's the deal. I'm going to take this off now because she's sort of done. Yeah, I did. It seems like you said in the last 20 years. I mean, what I was referring to was my personal experience. So when I went to Gold, the ranch was happening. I don't know for how long. I know Sterling was there because I got to go to Sterling and Mike Brown, and I knew Megan, who's Laura FM, and some of the other kids because I used to go out there. We used it as a back lot, and I would often go out there and hang out with the kids. And they were. I tell you a funny anecdote. I mean, it makes me cry to just think about it. But when I would go out there, because it was kind of a big deal to have the filming unit show up, and we're going to make a film on that property. And the kids would always come up and they, hug me, and I always thought these kids are very full of love. They're very high, as we say in Scientology, ARC, meaning they have a lot of affinity to give. And then I found out later, and this just tears me apart. These kids were so starved for adult connection, and so like they knew that I knew their parents, and touching me was like touching their parents, and it was so sad. And when I got out, I mean, I spent like a good hour in the corner of my bedroom in a darkened room, just sobbing when I thought about like kind of the disassociate how disassociated I was from the actual experience of what was happening, thinking these kids were being so friendly when they were just starved for love. So, but my point is, there were no babies there. And then I do know when I left Gold, the last interaction I had with them was in 2021. I haven't been there since early 2020, but like I know a couple of sisters uh, who were born into the Sea Org, and they're in their 40s, and I think they're pretty much the last of that breed. So there's no, this was like my impression was, Miss Gabbard said no more babies, no more kids. And that because randomly he ran into me one day and said, I don't want minors in this Sea Org anymore because it's too big a pain in the ass. You got to give them a caretaker, you got to get them educated. It's like let's just recruit people that are 18 and have a GED. So this was kind of like my reality. But again, if I asserted it as if it was the omnipresent reality anywhere, I apologize for that. And I've amended that statement, and I am on board with doing whatever we can, because I know what it's like to raise kids in Scientology. And my kids didn't have it as bad as a lot, because they didn't get a lot of auditing. They weren't auditing people, but the way their social structure was affected by Scientology was very toxic. And I'm glad they spent as little time. I think my younger son did the Purif when he was like 9 years old. Like, what was that about? But their mother and I, we were very adamant about, we had them very little in Scientology schools. We had them in private schools or public schools, secular, and nothing to do with Scientology. We had them in summer theater programs and music programs, nothing to do with Scientology, and sports programs, soccer. And so our kids were kind of like a little more, a few degrees of separation away from some of the kids who grew up in Scientology. Okay, let's see what we got here. Oh, hey, Lindsay. Uh, Big shout out to Lizzie. By the way, I'm going to be doing some more content with Lizzie. I was really happy to connect with her. A lot of you may know that my journey into Scientology was my journey away out of addiction, and that was, further complicated by being in Scientology. But at least I got off of drugs, and that's a whole story. And I'm going to be doing more stuff with her related to addiction, related to where we're planning on some things like, how drugs are romanticized in film, and so yeah, anyway, some of that work, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think she does terrific work. I know she's become a bit of a controversial figure, and that is not who she really is in my view, or her real purpose, which I think is very good. Okay, peace, dog. Peace out. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, Tracy in Tulsa, thanks a lot. She said, Mitch, I think your experience is different than others. I mean, the point is that everybody's experience is different. And it was kind of weird, because when I showed up and started telling mine, people were like, oh, you're just bragging, or you're a narcissist or whatever. But it's my experience, and I'm not bragging. I mean, I showed up mostly to apologize for all of the things that I did. I feel very well represented by that quote from Desmond Tutu, which talks about how everybody needs to be forgiven, and there's no way you can go back and undo the harm that you can do, but you can stop doing it. And I believe I've done that when I left. And you can ensure that harm never happens again. And so, I did that by speaking out and writing a book and doing media. That all comes under the heading of ensuring that harm stops, and it's never, and it ceases to continue. So I'm not. It's weird, but then trying to fit into a community that was there was sand and there was like I don't know how to say it, but I'm not here to impugn people, but it was weird because some people resisted it, some people challenged it, some people said, well, no, there's a standard of qualifications that we use to judge if your trauma or your experience is valid, and you don't quite fit up to that because you didn't work you never ate in the cafeteria with the enlisted men, which is not true. I ate in the back cafeteria or in the cafeteria at the HEB plenty of times, so that's not true. Or people said you got special treatment. You want to know what kind of special treatment I got? Yeah, I got, they brought my food to the table, but I ate the same food as they did, right? And, I didn't have to make my bed because they wanted me on set all day long. They didn't want me making a bed or cleaning my room or any shit like that. They're like, no, we'll take care of you, all that stuff. We've been 30 years without anybody who knew how to make a film, and now you do. We don't want you wasting your time making a bed. Anyway, that's kind of a weird way to put it. But what was I going to say? I completely lost my train of thought. But yeah, so I got some special treatment. Here's the special treatment I got. I got to be pulled in at times and used to amplify David Miscavige's abuse of staff. An example, which I wrote about in my book, was one day when I rounded a corner and he was screaming at 3 staff members because they screwed up the Dianetics campaign. And when he saw me, because I had been associated with that success of that campaign in the 80s, he triangulated me into his little grief storm where he was screaming at these people and making them sit on hot cement. And then he's pointing at me and saying, he's like blaming something that is not happening to me, but he's saying is on them. And it's just like, so that was very special treatment. So I got a lot of that. Or I'd be in a meeting with him and we'd be done. And he'd say, no, stay, come, sit here, sit on my side of the table. And then his girlfriend, Lou, would bring in all the top brass from OSA. And for an hour, I'd sit there while he screamed at them. Like literally like this kind of toxic screaming that is so traumatizing. And I know why he has me there, because they're being humiliated in front of somebody who's not in the Sea Org. And that really is a violation to their sort of personal identity. So yeah, I got a lot of special treatment. Thank you very much. Yeah, what is hey, hi, Blow Drill. So he says Sea Org couples got pregnant and would not abort. They were sent to Class 5 orgs to serve their time there. I wonder how many kids joined after growing up with Sea Org parents. Healing is not linear. Yeah, this is true, but I can tell you something about that. I knew they stopped doing that. They stopped sending pregnant Sea Org members to Class 5 orgs. The idea was they would go to work with a Class 5 org until their kids were like 7 years old, and then they would come back in the Sea Org. And you want to know why they stopped doing that? Because none of them came back. Once they got out and they saw what life was like, and maybe one of them would get a job and the other would work at the org, and then slowly they detach. So they completely stopped doing that. And then, my experience at Gold was, because I had, there were 2 couples I knew personally because they worked on the shoot crew. One of them, or both of them, worked on the shoot crew, and they got pregnant and they refused to go. So they got separated for about 6 weeks, and they got, brutally checked, security checked, interrogated. And then they were given like a burner phone and $50 and shown the door. And it was just like, that's what they did. But they stopped doing that thing about coercing abortions. As Rachel Hastings reported, they started requiring women to get IUDs or men get vasectomies before they get married. So they're still doing these horrific, kind of exerting horrific control over one's, fertility, one's ability to have children or decision to have children. And that's really, really terrible. Yeah, and I just want to say hi to my good friend Selena. Thanks for stopping by. And so Michael Hobson has a comment here. He says, Mitch, were you on orientation? If so, maybe I met you at the Center Creative Studios. Yeah, you probably did. Yeah, I did I did all the orientations. I did that first one. The one you're talking about was the one with Larry. We shot at the Center Creative Studios because we didn't have a studio yet. They were still building the big studio. So yeah, your name sounds kind of familiar. Hi, Liz. Nice to see you. I hope I did your letter justice. I told you I was going to read it, and there you go. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, this is so true. Hey, Don, thank you, because being made to watch abuse is abuse. It's horrible. Like, it's kind of like if you're slightly a sympathetic, empathic person, if you care about other people and you're watching, it's like you watch war footage on TV. You watch, it's traumatizing. I told the story about being audited by a 14-year-old girl who was being forced to use sexually explicit commands. And I could hear Marty Rathman screaming in her earpiece these commands. There was security outside the door. And there's a certain contingent of people that like, well, you weren't victimized. You're a perpetrator. You were involved in that. You could have just walked out. I couldn't have walked out. The two big guys would have grabbed me and slammed me back into my chair. But the most traumatizing thing about it was seeing what was happening to her, because I actually knew this person. She was a young person, 14 years old, that I would run into at the base and say hi, and I knew her mother. And then, it really messes you up, and it's all going into your body. You walk out there and you shake it off mentally. You shake it off, and it's just all stored in your body, just waiting to be triggered. But yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that comment, because it's like a lot of people don't get that. I mean, watching people being tortured is torture. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that somebody out there is gonna um, take what I'm saying apart and take it out of context and say, "Oh, look, he's just a narcissist who's trying to, whatever." So cry victim, or I don't know. I can't even imagine what these people come up with. Yeah, there are some shameless people. Look, there's a lot of comments about the individuals who've been less than kind to my presence here. I'm not even going to put the comments up, but I appreciate you saying them to me, but I'm not going to put them up because I don't want to kind of extend the toxicity. I'm not saying you're being toxic. You have a right to say whatever you want to say to me, but I'm not going to put them up. Okay, good. Oh, good. It's Nora, or maybe it's a fake Nora. This is an example of what I'm talking about. Mitch, you weren't telling the whole story. So many revisions here. I have clips of what you said and how you said it in the context of your video. That's fine, Nora. You can do another video and you can show the world what did you call me? Uh, but you don't know me. You don't understand how I talk and what I say. But I have very consistently said what I have said. I tell you, the only thing that I really feel that I've changed, and Nora, you should pay close attention to this, is uh, and by the way, Rachel Hastings is one of my closest friends, and she did not appreciate what you said, that I was just using her name to get some credibility, because she is like, let me just say, you're not her favorite person. So anyway, the only thing that I've changed is when I first came on YouTube, I made the mistake of saying there were things about David Miscavige that I admired. And why that was a mistake is I didn't say when I was a brainwashed cult member, there were things about David Miscavige that I admired. But the fact of the matter is, when I was watching YouTube and what people were saying about Miscavige, I don't think um, they really understand how dangerous he can be, because the level of his psychopathy is almost admirable in that weird kind of way. Like, not that you would ever brag about it or emulate it or acknowledge it as being positive. Uh, so anyway, whatever. That was like, I had to sort of learn how to reframe things, because it's like, I know who this guy is, but it's like, I admired the way that he could actually trick people into thinking that he wasn't the laziest person in the world. I kind of admire that. That's a real talent. Not something I would ever do or emulate it, but you have to be very careful about how you say things there. Uh, yeah, but the thing is, let's just leave Nora alone. Just let her do her thing. I don't care. She doesn't know me. Nora, if I reached out to her after the first time. she did a attack video on me, and I said, "Hey, look, have me on. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Let's have a discussion. I'll send you my book, a free copy. You can read it. Like, get a sense of what my story is and what I'm trying to say." And she's like, "Nope, nope, no thanks." So that's okay. It's like, maybe for better or for worse, I'm the kind of person that's like wants to find the person in the room that hates me the most and have a conversation with them, because to me that's going to be the most interesting conversation if they're willing to have a conversation. So it's just kind of a matter. I mean, that's kind of where I'm at. Anyway, that's fine. Nora, you're welcome here along with everybody else. I'm not gonna address your comments directly. So, except for one, I'm gonna address one. The other day when you attacked me on a stream, for some reason you felt that demeaning Los Angeles, like, okay, if you ask me where I'm from, I'll say Los Angeles. If you say where'd you grow up, I'll say Laurel Canyon. You're probably the same way. Where'd you grow up? You'll say Beverly Hills. I never had anything on it. That was never a brag. Doug Scott Kramer, before he passed away, he and I became good friends. And he was like telling me, "I'm jealous you grew up in Laurel Canyon." He wanted to do a series of streams with me. We were in talks about streaming about growing up in Laurel Canyon. People were way more interested in it than I was. It figured in my book because I don't think I would have gotten onto drugs the way I did if I hadn't grown up in Laurel Canyon. But you painted this picture, Nora, of Los Angeles in the 60s as some podunk town. And yet that's not true. In 1960, the Ventura Freeway opened, and that was the end of the agricultural scene in the San Fernando Valley. And the Sunset Strip was like the Crescendo and Ciro's and Dino's Lodge and these mob-owned clubs where you had like Lenny Bruce and all these people. I mean, in the 60s, it wasn't what you said, but you kind of had to say that so that you could demean me and say, "Oh yeah, he just grew up in some cow town." Like LA back then was like nothing. And that's really not true. And you just go to the Googles and you can see that. So I'm not sure why you do that, why you want to take somebody's environment and everything they say and kind of demean them. It's very bizarre. Okay, so we're going to move on. Yeah, so I'm like, can we just all be friends and have like a big hug and get back on the same team, bringing down Scientology? I mean, I spent most of 7 months writing a 436-page book, figuring out how to publish it, getting it edited, getting it designed, and I did it to tell a story that I thought would help people understand how this happens to them and what we can do about it. And I was just like, dude, you're just shamelessly trying to sell a book. And it was just like, I never understood that, but I'm not going to defend myself anymore. I wasn't intending to come on here and defend myself. I get a little reactive when I see the stuff. I mean, I'm still, obviously working through my own stuff. Yeah. Please. The world's smallest Can We Ever Be Friends cassettes. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I think there's no starred comments. Yeah, okay, look, I'm really sorry about my book hasn't come out yet. I've just finished the 7th chapter out of 26. It's starting to speed up. I'm going to take a little break. I have some editing, filmmaking work that I need to do so I can pay my rent. I'm going to have to push the book aside for maybe a little bit, but it will come out. And so, yeah, and I'll let you know. Yeah, this is, I've heard this. Hey, Stana. I answered your email, by the way. So, as a never-in, as Stana rhymes with Donna says, as a never-in, it's disturbing to me that there isn't more empathy among Scientologists for one another. Yeah, me too. I mean, it's really disappointing. I know that when I first came out, and I was kind of talking to Aaron Smith-Levin under the radar, and I was like, "Hey, dude, I'm writing. Anything you want to know? I just left the base a year and a half ago. You're free to ask me." He's like, "Cool. Why don't you come on my channel?" And I'm like, And well, yeah, no, I'm writing a book, and I think I want to like release a book and do the channel, do it all at once. He's like, no, 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 no. You should come on and so people know you, and we'll promote the book and blah blah blah. Anyway, that went in a different direction. But one thing that I did that I did discover was I kind of walked in really naively and a little bit, a little bit like, whoa, like just having come out of a horrible time. And I was like, I thought we were all on the same team. No, this is tribal. There's different tribes. My definition of tribe is when you use what you know to drown out the voices of other people. Then you're being tribal. Like, that's not tribe. Tribe's good. Find your tribe, all that stuff. But being tribal is a very negative thing. It's when you scream your stuff because you want to drown somebody out, not because you want to have a discourse on them. But so, okay, good. So Michael Hobson says, Mitch, may I ask what made you finally quit? Smoking or Scientology? I guess you're talking about drugs, smoking. So I guess you're talking about Scientology. What finally made me quit? Well, a bunch of things. And unfortunately, my mind, I was very spiritually and mentally dislodged from Scientology 10 to 15 years before I left. And one of the things I really had to grapple with was how long I stayed there just because I was paying a lot of money. I was being paid, like I didn't want to be unemployed. Like, it was a really coward's way out. And I'll be the first one to admit that, because that was one thing that I had to resolve and had to heal from and had to make up for. Like, wow, you really stayed a long time because you just didn't want to be unemployed. And there's another aspect of it too, which is that I was responsible for a bunch of people much younger than me, filmmakers, who, if I left, their lives would just, as CIRG members, boy, they would struggle. And, so I kind of made sure I trained somebody and that they'd be okay. Like soldiers in the trenches who say, what are you fighting for? And the answer is, I'm fighting for the guy next to me. So there was a little bit of that, like my actually caring about these people. But, my view on it now is that all I was doing was enabling the abuser. It's like, keeping quiet. Like I tell people that under the radar, like, I can appreciate you being under the radar, but I stayed under the radar in Scientology because I didn't want to be unemployed and lose whatever I was going to lose. But when you do that, you're just helping the abuser. When you stay quiet and you don't speak out, you're just enabling the abuser. It never helps the abused. So why did I quit? Well, I started to see Miscavige's his mask dropped, and I started to see his really abusive nature. I started to see how he could create this mask of being this really gracious guy in public, and when he needed to be, and being this brutal, sarcastic, racist, homophobic, misogynistic, horrible person with no taste and a bad sense of humor. And I just couldn't resolve it. And then plus I had, I was like, I'm supporting an anti-gay group. That was a big thing for me, because I eventually had to like deal with the fact that that was against my core principles, my core beliefs, to be supporting a group that was so toxic and was anti-gay and actually had a kind of a scientific body of knowledge, which they considered science. They considered settled science, which proved their point that of why they were so anti-gay. So that was a real problem. So basically, that's why I quit. Also, the level of interaction was toxic. Like my phone would ring, my heart would jump into my throat. I'm like, oh my God, I'm in LA. I get a call. You need to get up here right now. We got a problem. And you just never knew when your life was going to be upset or unsettled. Or so, there were a bunch of reasons, and eventually just got to be too much. Yep. Well, I hope you're all reading the chat amongst yourselves, because a lot of this I'm not going to put up because it's just kind of, I guess it's just, it's not part of the overall discussion. Yeah, this is Echoplex Media said, I know a lot of people who started questioning the cult due to their homophobia. Yeah, I mean, this was like, and I knew one, I was on course with a gay guy who I became friends with. Eventually he left, but he was really, it was kind of when Scientology, it was a celebrity center, and they were sort of being under the wire about being anti-gay. And once, this was in the late 80s, and once Miscavige took over, I mean, that guy is just like, he's like insane, insanely anti-gay. It's probably why he gets on so well with the Nation of Islam, because he doesn't like Jews and he doesn't like gay people. Yeah, I mean, I can say I'll make one comment about the sort of some of the bullying that goes on in our community. It creates a very unhealthy atmosphere. Okay, so you could say that so I was the base in 2020. So I'm a pretty new, refugee, you could say. Um, so let's say that there's somebody, forget Gold, because Gold is just a backwater production facility. It doesn't mean anything anymore. They just make shiny objects to put on the TV broadcast station. But let's say somebody wanted to leave Scientology Media Productions, like Rachel when she left. I mean, that's big. That's where Scientology's run from. That's where Miscavige is. He runs it from Scientology Media Productions. If somebody wanted to leave there with all of this sort of bullying and toxicity going on in the quote unquote anti-Scientology space, it's not safe to speak out. There's probably people who may want to speak out and they're worried that they're just going to be slaughtered. So, I mean, I've made this analogy before. If you can imagine, there was a guy, I can't think of his name. He worked for R.J. Reynolds Tobacco, and he was the guy that came out and blew the whistle. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He blew the whistle on the tobacco company. You might remember, what's his name, played him in a movie. This was a big deal, and nobody said, but you're a bad person because you played golf with the head of R.J. Reynolds. Nobody impugned the guy. They were saying, okay, good, you had enough. You left and you called him out. I mean, sure, he was the first. I wasn't the first person to call people out in Scientology for sure. But I did my bit. I went to the, I spoke to the FBI. I wrote a book. I did media. I did YouTube. I did whatever I could, as I said, to make sure that damage was going to stop and not be done again. And because I honestly thought that, well, anyway, I honestly thought I deserved to have a better life than the one that I had. And that's not something you can just assume. It's something you have to work towards and earn. So I've worked hard to do that. Sorry, but it's, everybody deserves to be loved. So let me just say something that I plan on doing an entire stream about, and that's the normalization, what I refer to, and this is not a term I made up, it's the normalization of emotional abuse. And there is so much of this in cults, in abusive relationships. It goes like this. After you get love bombed into your abusive relationship or your cult, and things start sort of leveling out, you need to get to course on time, or you're going to go to ethics. If you're on staff, you need to show them your BP, or you're going to go to ethics. You're being judged for how you respond in the world. There's all these things that are very abusive, and they become normalized. And this is why then you see people allowing the whole to happen, because if the baseline of normal emotional abuse is high enough, then incarcerating people and physically torturing them, it's not that far above that. You get what I'm saying? So when you're in Scientology, or you're in an abusive relationship, or you're in some kind of a cult, or any high demand organization, you become programmed to accept a baseline of emotional abuse, which is above normal. And you don't know that. You think it's normal. And so there's a lot of people that have left Scientology, and they've carried it right into their anti-Scientology activities. Like, it's the need to find enemies, the need to seek chaos, the need to create conflict. All of that is part of the normalization of emotional abuse, and it's one's programming. And one of the hardest things to do is to be able to detect, decode, unpack, and break down your own programming. This is really hard. I know, because I'm still going at it. So, but it starts with trying to gain enough self-awareness to say, wait a minute, leaving, making the decision to leave and then leaving, that doesn't get you whole. That's just the start. So a lot of the stuff that I see it as that normalization of emotional abuse being carried into the secular world by those individuals. It makes it hard for me to be mad at them. I'm only or upset with them. I'm only upset because they're not doing the work that needs to be done so that you can arrive at a kinder place. That's all. So that's my, hey, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. That's my spiel for today. But these are my thoughts, and these are the things that I think about, and this is kind of where I live. Yeah, it's yeah. Anyway, so there you go. I think I'm just going to end this now. If nobody else has any more, because I've got work that I need to do, and it's been great seeing you guys. I'm going to keep coming back and trying to bring some just fresh air into the scene. Again, I wanted to clarify what I said about children of the Sea Org. I understand teenagers specifically, are being recruited, and I never said there's no children at Scientology, because there's plenty of children at Scientology, and I pray for those children. I think about those children, and I'm hoping that we can all do something to make sure that those children aren't exposed to that kind of abuse. So with that, for some reason my mouse is not working today. Here, I'll try my trackpad. So with that, we're going to sign off. Everybody say hi to my little dog, and I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks a lot for coming by. Oh!